Michael McBride, host of Veritas Views. Today's episode deals with a question that shows up everywhere, whether at home or work or sitting across from a therapist. And that question is, what do you do when you hit a limit and someone else experiences your limit as a problem? Because limits are where things often get messy. Deadlines collide, expectations stack up, someone is waiting on you, someone is disappointed, someone assumes the worst, and suddenly you're not just managing the situation, you're managing everyone else's interpretation of the situation. Today's episode is about how to handle that moment without panicking, without overpromising, and without turning every constraint into a character flaw. We begin with Try This at Work, a new segment, where we talk about competing deadlines and competing stakeholders, and the hardest professional sentence to say out loud, which is, I can't do all this by the time given or the time allowed. We'll give you a way to communicate capacity without sounding defensive and a way to renegotiate scope without burning trust. Then we jump to Am I the Asshole, where the limit is time and a failure is communication. One partner is stuck at work late and can't notify the other. The question becomes, how do you handle the impact when there wasn't intent, but there still was disappointment and letdown? And finally, that would never work in therapy. We go to the Sopranos and talk about termination. What happens when a therapist wants to end treatment, needs to end treatment, or realizes the work has reached its limit? What does ethical closure actually look like, and why do endings bring about so much emotion on both sides? 3 settings, 1 thread, which is essentially how do we handle this, and what do we owe each other when we reach those limits? Let's get into it.
All right, this is a brand new segment that I have not shared with Dan or Gail, so we'll see
Oh
how
boy.
this goes.
Yay!
It's been a season of trying new things and seeing what works, and you guys have been great sports with it. So
Excellent.
so I'm calling this "Try This at Work," and essentially what I'm going to do is I'm going to hand you both a common workplace scenario, and you will hopefully give me back some simple tips or suggestions that you can use right away. I don't know about everyone out there, but for me, it helps to have something in my back pocket ready to go for when a scenario presents itself instead of trying to stumble through it like I do sometimes on these intros. So here's today's scenario. It's Tuesday. You have 2 deadlines, both urgent. Your boss pings you. Can you get this by Friday? A program manager in another area messages, we need it Wednesday for the steering committee deck. The work is real work, a slide deck you have to build, numbers you have to validate, a couple subject matter experts you still haven't heard back from. And you're also already committed to a standing meeting load that eats half your day. You can feel yourself beginning to bargain with reality. Maybe you can do both. Maybe you can stay up late at night, skip lunch, whatever, hope nobody asks questions. And so the ask is, how do you manage this scenario in a way that protects the quality of work, your relationships, and your sanity?
You said you were going to ping one of us or the other of us.
Yeah,
are
I have
you-
an
No,
answer
both
for
of
it,
you.
yeah.
Like, do
All
it.
right, Dan, go. You had an answer.
No, I have an answer. You're responding to whomever it is your most direct supervisor or in charge of this project, and the question is, I have multiple there are multiple shit.
Competing?
I'm forgetting the exact
Competing?
yes, thank you, Gail.
You're
I
welcome.
have multiple competing priorities here and won't be able to complete all of them in the timeline recommended. How would you suggest that I prioritize these tasks moving forward, or something like that? So you're letting them know, like, this is not possible. What would you like me to do to prioritize things? And that way you're not saying there's no way I can get this done. Like, help me to prioritize these multiple tasks that interfere with that I'm not able to all complete within the timeline allotted. What do you
Yeah,
thought?
I mean, I don't have anything very interesting to add because I think Dan is 100% right. You go to the most senior of the people you report to, you explain what those competing deadlines are. Maybe you have a sense of pros and cons, and you ask for clarity. Maybe you ask for additional team members. Again, I think Dan is 100% right. You don't say, I can't get this done. You say, these are the resources I'm going to need in order to get this done in this timeline.
Right.
given that, is that the direction you'd like to go, or do you have other recommendations? And I think we don't do that often enough.
Mhm.
I think we can get stuck in the nervous system sort of overwhelm of it all, and then feel like we either function on
Mhm.
just pure adrenaline, which is not very thoughtful most of the time, or we become less functional, right? And we start scrolling, some internet forum or, that kind of thing, and not actually getting the task
Right.
done, and then stay up late and not eat and those kinds of things. So I think, part of this is taking that breath to slow down, know that you need to slow down, and then figure out what you need to prioritize in order to move forward again.
Yeah. And to be really clear about that, I really like putting all of these things in writing in a corporate structure, in an email. And if it is a phone call, I like to follow up with phone call. I think that it's not me. This is the general recommendation.
Right.
If it is a phone call or an in-person conversation, you follow that up with an email. Per our conversation earlier, you would like me to prioritize this and this task. I do believe I'll be able to complete this task by Tuesday, this task by Thursday. This task will not likely get completed until next week, as we discussed. And you're not saying that as a like, oh, I'm not doing it. You're documenting the conversation such that if there's a question down the road, there's clarity on that, on what you agreed to do and what you didn't agree to do, and what was it. Your boss doesn't need to respond. They receive the email. If they don't respond, it's accepted. If they do respond, then you have a further thread in discussion.
So let me complicate this a little bit, because
Of
I love
course.
what you say, and it makes a lot of sense. But our oldest is going on college visits, and one of the places that he visited, the professor that we met with said that he works against grind culture. And I was like, what is grind culture? I mean, I kind of had a sense of what it was, but I wanted to hear him talk about it. And he said, and our oldest was interested in going into the gaming industry in terms of, he's more interested in analog games, but he was, in this case, specifically talking about video games. And he said the video game culture industry is a grind culture industry
Mm-hmm.
where you are just expected to do whatever is necessary. If that's 80 hours a week, if that's 100 hours a week, it doesn't matter. You're expected to do that to make it happen.
Mm-hmm.
And the professor said, I work against that. And I try to give you the tools to set firm boundaries, to establish and kind of like work to end grind culture. But I'm wondering, like, if you're in a scenario where you're stuck in this industry and the expectation is great, you have two competing deadlines, both are urgent. It's your task to do it. Maybe even to refer back to one of our other segments, you're only one of however many people available to do this task.
Yeah.
How do you navigate that? Is there
Well,
a different approach, or is it the same approach just said differently?
no, this is a tough question because I've worked with people who work within an industry that is sometimes referred to as big law. This is like big law firms in urban centers where there is an expectation of putting in a tremendous number of billable hours that is well in excess of what's normative for what we think about as a work week. And if you decided to not do that, if you set a boundary, you would not be able to be employed within that industry. So then the challenge is tougher, because you can't set a boundary that's reasonable or rational, that you believe is reasonable or rational, without potentially losing your job or having to find something else to do. And there are those worlds where that exists, and there's not great. Like, I don't have a good answer for that for those folks who are in those kinds of, you know, if you work there are some fields of programming that when you're doing a release, there's no like, oh, it's 5 o'clock, I need to leave now. There are people who are doing software releases and they need to be working all night
I
and
think,
putting
though,
out fires, and that's part of the job, and that's really problematic. It shouldn't be every day part of the job, I don't believe,
right.
but it can be.
But I think that's the difference in the two examples that you're giving, right? In software release, there may be some ebbs and flows in that. And then in that case, we can really work with people to see the temporariness of this and make a recovery plan when the demand goes down a little bit. I think it's harder when, and Michael, you use the word grind culture, which I think for me suggests a level of intensity that doesn't let up, right? It's continuous and chronic, and that becomes a lot more difficult. I think this is where we see individuals leaning or finding themselves in burnout.
Mm-hmm.
And I think then you're creating a burnout plan. And one
Right.
of the ways that you see people compensate with that is to kind of swing in the other direction to sort of recover, I think, at a nervous system level, right? So you see individuals maybe engaging in pretty intensive workouts, maybe planning even lovely vacations just to
Right.
be able to unplug and get away, even if it's just for a brief amount of time. Because I think without that nervous system reset, we have a problem, and I don't
Right.
know that it's sustainable to just continue to push through. And I think that is just problematic in certain industries.
It is.
And I don't know that people always know that they're entirely signing up for it, or they think they can handle it, and then they get in it and they feel absolutely swamped. I was recently on a podcast with Eugene Lee, and his podcast is Give Yourself Some Leeway, and it's all about burnout and how our culture is organized around burnout, and what do we need to be doing, and how does our identity, there we go, lean toward this and make us sort of prone to experiencing symptoms of burnout, and what can we do to recover from that?
Right. And you're never, and there are certain fields that in medicine, they passed some new rules a number of years. They're not new anymore. They're rules that have been in place for a while now for medical residents, but those rules, I think, limit hours per week to 80, which is
It's insane.
It is. It's not healthy.
We don't let pilots fly that much.
On the other hand, you're not going to become a physician and make it through residency unless you are able to do that. And that's not a reasonable, rational thing. I was on a panel once years ago with people were attending were college students who were thinking about medicine as a career, and a bunch of physicians. And one of them asked of the OBGYN in the room, like how do you develop work-life balance with the demands of being an OBGYN? And she leaned forward and said, "You don't." Because babies,
especially an OBGYN, I mean, babies come
exactly.
whenever.
So. I think the response was you become a dermatologist. Who like they tend to work a 9 to 5 job, or 7 to 3 or whatever. But yeah, I mean, there's the answer is you don't. You find a different career field, and that's callous and shouldn't be that way, etc. However, that is the nature of some of these jobs, and I feel myself talking out of both sides of my mouth, because on one hand, I'm like, we should all be working jobs where we're healthy and we have good boundaries and limit setting. And at the same time, there are certain jobs and job fields that simply that's not going to happen.
So let me add one final twist to this, which is, and perhaps this is asking for a friend, which is...
You're very wrinkly today. Lots of wrinkles.
What happens if you are anxious that you won't be able to meet both deadlines, but you might be able to? Like, is there a way to, like, what does that look like to reach out to the supervisor to say, hey, I don't know I can do this. I will do my best. However, heads up. Or like, what does that look like?
It's a greater degree of complexity than Gail, do you have an answer for this?
I mean, I think this anxiety, then, if you're having symptoms of a mental health nature, it is on you to check in, like you said earlier, Dan, and ask yourself, what of this can I manage? What is my responsibility? What is maybe workplace culture? And ideally, we're not in this spot without having a relationship with our supervisory, staff and managers. And so that is part of, I think, workplace culture, is being able to hopefully put into place where a system where your employees can come to you and say, I have competing priorities. And if you don't have that, and you have an employee who's anxious, then, we maybe are looking at what is the workplace culture? Is it beyond reasonable? And are people sort of complicit in this unreasonable culture that maybe we need to be pushing against? Again, I tend to think that American culture leans toward this disregard for boundaries, work-life balance, and ability for workers to say, hey, whereas I think other cultures maybe are, and maybe I'm being idealistic, leave me mailbag and let me know, right? Where we would have an encouragement toward those boundaries, and understanding that just because we can do it now doesn't mean we should do it now.
Right. No, I think that is the case, that certain countries have very different work cultures around how much work you do at different time, and how much extra time is considered appropriate or not appropriate. And I would love to see some changes in culture for many industries, but I'm not in charge of those industries. So.
And think about it, Dan. I think workplace culture even varies within our nation.
Oh,
If I
yeah.
think about, workplace culture in Hawaii or California or somewhere along the West Coast, I imagine that to some extent that is different depending on the organization, because we have some big national organizations out there versus some of the East Coast versus Midwest versus the South.
Right.
We have
Agreed.
microcultures that exist here too.
Agreed.
Great. Well, thank you both for humoring me with try this at work. We'll see if it becomes a reoccurring segment.
Dan, I think you and I have both talked with people who think, gosh, if my loved one just worked harder at snapping out of the depression, they'd be fine. They'd be better.
Yeah. And that's really not fair to tell someone who is depressed and really not feeling like they have the energy to move forward. I mean, depression really saps you.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, this isn't about being lazy. Your brain is shutting down and shutting out and cannot see the energy and the hope.
Yeah. And when people get stuck there, they feel in the moment like there isn't an easy way out. Like, and when their family members or other people in their lives might be telling them like, just pull your, and they're not, I mean, they're not wrong in that we can treat depression through behavioral activation and getting stuff done. However, that depressed person, it often just feels like they're being told what to do by someone who's not really understanding where they are.
Right. If you are just feeling piled on and can't find your way out, think about just giving a shout out to us at veritaspp.com and see if we can help you.
We're going to do another Am I the Asshole debate here. So
Excellent.
Dan, Gail, you guys ready to roll?
Absolutely. I love these.
All right, so here's the teaser / subject, whatever we want to call it. Am I an asshole for leaving work an hour and a half late and not informing my husband?
Oh.
Maybe.
So here's like
Asshole? Mens rea? Are we going to mens rea, Dan?
Yeah, asshole is kind of a strong word. And at the same time, like this is one of those, it depends. It's possible that
we need to hear the surrounding supporting evidence information.
So yeah, let's hear more. But I have a thought already. But let's hear more.
And remember, within the Am I the Asshole rubric, we do have, no,
varying,
but you suck, right? Like there's varying degrees of judgment we can pass here.
Yeah, but well, here's what even without talking further, hearing further, what we need to know is what is the agreement between the couple on leaving work late, and what has happened in the past.
Agreed.
Yeah.
I don't know that I have anything immediately to add to that.
Michael, go.
All right, this is what we got. OP is female. They do not specify age, but based on that, I'm guessing probably 40s, just by context. So anyway, this is what she says. A couple days ago, I had to stay at work an hour and a half past my scheduled time because my replacement was late due to a personal emergency. I work in a sterile environment, so I can't bring my phone in, and it takes nearly an hour to leave and return due to extensive prep and gowning process. There's no quick way to check in, no phones, computers, or landlines inside, and stepping out risks discipline or even termination. Once I got out, I texted my husband immediately to explain and apologize and let him know I was headed home. When I got home, he was short with me all night. After we got the kids down, I asked him to talk, knowing that it was about me being late. I apologized again and told him I truly couldn't contact him any sooner. He said I should have left on time regardless because he had plans he had to cancel to stay with the kids. He also said this isn't the first time I've been late, though it's never been this long before, and that going forward I need to either leave on time or ask his permission to stay late. I genuinely couldn't have done anything differently and was just trying to do my job. So, am I the asshole?
I take exception with I couldn't have done anything differently. I don't know that that's true. I think sometimes we get ourselves into these situations and we think we couldn't have done anything differently, but there's almost always something we could have done differently. And I do feel like this OP is trying to lead us toward, no, you're not the asshole at all. You're completely fine.
Yeah.
And your husband should just, relax a little. And I am concerned about, the way she's portrayed her partner's response, but I do think off the bat there's something she could have done differently. So that's like my high level take. Dan, what's your high level take?
Yeah. I mean, my first thought was that OP is clearly trying to steer us towards supporting her in her argument with her husband that she's done nothing wrong. And I kind of believe that she may be mostly right. Right, mostly right. It would be, even if she works in a lab, or works in a completely sterile environment, there is almost always some way of taking notes or communicating to the outside world. There is sterile equipment in the lab with a sterile keyboard that you can use to message someone. They had to have been able to notify her of like how did they let her know you need to stay late? And if she needs to leave the environment because she has to go to the bathroom urgently, or there is some problem, there's got to be some way of notifying someone outside the room. It seems highly unlikely than not. Oh, our intrepid host has his hand up.
I realized I have 4 pieces of information that she provided as follow-up information. So,
well, please.
Sorry,
am
was
I the asshole for holding back important information?
Exactly. I was going to say that. Am I the asshole for withholding important information?
You get to see behind the curtain here. I wrote this up last year sometime, and I hadn't looked at the rest of the post until today. So I'm sorry.
So we'll say on this one, not the asshole for you.
Because no mens rea.
Well,
because
not
you
yet.
did not intend to hold back the information.
Thank you.
But
I appreciate
We'll discuss your competence later.
Okay, so I'm deeply fascinated by trying to figure out where she works, first of all, and I was unsuccessful in that. But these are the 4 pieces of clarifying information she gave. 1, leaving the sterile space takes 45 to 60 minutes, which I'm like,
Fair.
That seems...
Yeah, and she said that in the original post.
No, that's fair. For some sterile spaces, there's multiple layers you have to don and doff, and I could see that as being a legitimate thing, that it takes her 45 minutes to an hour. Yeah,
right.
Communication is only possible via walkie-talkie and only for work purposes. So that was number 2. Number 3 says leaving without coverage means production halts and she risks disciplinary action or termination, which she said earlier. And then number 4, her husband had also recently changed his phone number and she didn't have the new one memorized to tell anybody else to be able to reach out to him. Okay, now I feel like you're well informed to have your conversation.
Okay, so actually, interestingly, that really doesn't change anything for me. I think they could have done something differently. And who changes their phone number anymore, by the way? That's kind of weird, but okay, so we'll take it at face value that he changed his phone number, fine. But that phone number should be on record with your employer as an emergency contact. And the walkie-talkie is the means for contact with the outside world and part of your work. Then when they say, hey, by the way, Renee didn't come in to work today, or is going to be an hour and a half late, I need you to stay so that we don't halt production. Her response is in the affirmative, and I need you to contact my husband to let him know that I will be late by some amount of time. And that is a legit work communication. So she should have and could have communicated at that time. And if they said, well, what's his phone number? I don't know. It was recently updated. Will you please pull it from the HR file? Someone should be able to do that. Now, so I do think she could have done something here.
Here's where I'm swayed a little bit by this new information. 1, absolutely, it is a bona fide, legit work thing to say, call my husband. He needs to be notified. We have kids. And he's going to need to cancel something. That is completely legitimate as a work communication. Okay, so number 2, if anything, confirms that she should have done this. At the same time, as someone who's not the most detail-oriented person, if my wife had changed her phone number, the likelihood that I would have updated that in my HR file hovers around 0. And so there might be no way of communicating. However, at least off the top of that, however, she didn't change her email address. And I can probably get my kids, and if it's really an emergent situation, maybe they can even grab, well, they probably can't grab her phone. It's probably locked up. Usually when you go into those things, you have to put your phone away, you lock it in a cabinet. But I know there is some way of communicating with him. So I moved a little bit, but I still think husband's reaction was not terribly understanding or kind.
No, I
And
completely agree.
I'm
And
troubled by both of their behavior in this case.
yes, and if we just compartmentalize it like in pieces, like I think we've identified the things that she could have done differently. I would have liked to have seen the couple
Hmm.
discussing what does this look like? You know, if she were a single parent and she had to pick up kids at daycare, I'm curious what the company would do, right? It's 6 p.m. They call CPS after 6 o'clock if you don't pick up your kid, or it is,
Yeah.
$15 an hour. Like they sometimes
Oh,
charge exorbitant rates
it's no,
for,
it's five at my kid's daycare 15, 12 years ago. It was $5 a minute
yeah. And so, I mean,
after 5 minutes. Yeah.
it is really cost prohibitive
Hmm.
and you need to be able to get a hold of it. So like I have some problems with exactly how this is playing out. And it may just be the reality of like, well, too bad, so sad, like you're going to be in a pickle. But I
Right.
would have liked to see the couple have some discussion about this. Like these are the
The-
limitations. Every occasionally I may be pulled into this. I'm very sorry, those kinds of things. And then to transition to what you were saying, Dan, and the feeling of sort of troubledness about his reaction. He had an expectation that was probably reasonable given the information he had earlier in the day that I'm going to be able to downshift from my parenting duties and go do this other thing. I don't know, meet my curling team for our weekly match or whatever it was. And he is annoyed that that wasn't able to work out. And I understand that, but it does seem like the way he showed his annoyance in this sort of passive cold shoulder and then, completely blaming her is problematic. And I don't feel comfortable with how he reacted to this. He reacted poorly.
I'm also troubled by this third party character that's not mentioned in this, which is the employer.
Yes.
I don't think it's reasonable for an employer to say to their employee, oh, the person after you didn't show up, now you have to stay. Like, like
Yeah.
that's on the company to have proper backup or have something in place for that kind of thing to happen. For an entire production line to shut down because one person has to go home and take care of their kids or pick up their kids at daycare or has a stomach bug and can't come in, that's
That's
on
what I was just thinking.
that's on the company. Like what is going on there that they're going to shut down because someone had something for lunch that they probably shouldn't have had, and now I got to run to the bathroom. Like
Yeah.
I'm troubled by that as well. So I have issues here.
Yes. But
But
that said, how do you feel
oh
about the husband's response?
I think his reaction seems to be based on again what Opie is saying. I'm not happy with with his reaction. I think his reaction is not
Mildly dickish?
he at least mildly dickish, if not moderately to significantly dickish. Because here's a situation where he knows his wife is in a challenging job. She has a lot going on. She's explained why she's late. She sounds like she's apologized to him for it. It, I mean, the situation sucks. And if I had curling that night and my wife was an hour and a half late, I would be like, damn, my team like relies on me to help them lose every week, and I had to like cancel on the team, and I'd be but would I be but like it's the degree to which she talked about his being angry versus understanding that I'm a bit troubled by,
Yeah.
and then the demand you have to leave and you have to like that really that's where to me he crosses the line away from mildly
Mm,
dickish
I had
and
forgotten
starts
about
like
that part. You're
yeah,
right.
that demand I had to until I was halfway through what I was saying.
Mhm.
Like no, you have to leave and you have to be here when you say you're going to be here. or you have to. I am not comfortable with that behavior on his part, and it's very male privilegey and in a way that I'm not okay with.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And unfortunately, when you make those kinds of demands, and even if she agrees, okay, I'll leave, it does mean she is going to lose her job, it sounds like. And so are you okay with the outcome that of this that means that now you're down to a single income, which might be problematic for them.
But unless if someone is being required to stay, I would also argue that needs to be part of their job. Like it needs to be compensated properly. Like I don't know what her arrangement is with the employer, that the employer can just say to her, "Oh, you're stuck. You have to stay another hour and a half." That's not
right.
To me, that's
and
not
maybe
okay
she
at
gets
all.
paid time and a half. Who knows? She didn't put that in the post.
Or is in her, unless it's in her contract, I'm troubled by that behavior on the part of the company. Even if it is in a contract, I'm troubled by her behavior behavior on the part of the company. But like, I'm not happy about. I think everyone could have done something differently here, and everyone is some degree of, oh, you're out of line here. I'm more annoyed at the husband than I am at her. But I still don't believe that there's nothing she could have done to have gotten message back to him.
Right.
And I'm annoyed with the company for acquiring her. I'm annoyed that, like, why would you have the situation set up that one person is the linchpin for an entire production line? Like, there's a lot going on here.
Yes, I think in order, it's husband, company, her, but they all have some amount of responsibility.
They're all
that they could have done better. Yes. Everybody sucks here.
Everyone sucks here. They're
just
all
in different
culpable
degrees.
in some way, just in different amounts. I am most annoyed with the husband for like being so demanding with his wife, but I'm also not happy with her about her choices, and she's making excuses for herself, and I'm certainly not happy with the company. So, what did the internet say, Michael? Gail and I both think everyone sucks here in different degrees.
Yeah,
not equally sucks.
And not that you asked me, but I tend to agree with you as well. But
I didn't ask you.
The internet.
We're trained professionals, Michael.
The internet really got hung up on the husband's language, and then really said, that you're not the asshole. Like, his demands are unreasonable, and so on. And so that was probably 90% of the comments. There were a couple people who did say you're the asshole, and because they were like, there has to be a way to communicate. This is this is ridiculous, blah, blah, blah. Your employer can only demand so much. This seems unreasonable. So kind of rolled the blame of the employer into blaming the employee, which seemed kind of shitty. And then there was a smaller contingency that said everybody sucks here, and really did essentially kind of spell out what you guys did there as well, that everyone, the employer, the wife, the husband, all had different things to do. One of the different things they should have done, I guess, is really what I should say there. One of the things that was kind of a side conversation that the original poster did not respond to was what happens when the husband is late for something. Does he have to ask her permission? And that spiraled into this whole side conversation about gender dynamics and that kind of thing, which she did.
Yeah, I was going to say that touches on Dan's comment about male privilege. And sometimes, unfortunately it matters, but it doesn't. Like in this situation, it doesn't give her permission to be shitty if he's late just because he's shitty when she's late. Like that it doesn't work that way. And I think we can get tripped into that when we're trying to demonstrate the fairness of, well, she doesn't get to be shitty when he's late, so he shouldn't be shitty. But the vice versa isn't true. Like we should just be kind. We should be respectful. We should be understanding. We should assume positive intent. And, to go back to Dan's beach volleyball, like we should set up our partner to win, to score the point. And he's not setting her up to score the point. She's there, I'm sure, just like kind of maybe shitting bricks about how he's going to react when she gets home, which isn't doing anything for her production, I'm sure.
Right. No, there's a lot of blame to go around here for sure. But I'm most annoyed with him.
There were the other side conversation that I followed, maybe because it matched my curiosity, was, where the fuck do you work? And so like all these people are trying to figure it out, and they're like all these guesses. They're like, okay, based on, these posts that she's done in the past, like they dug into her Reddit profile and it's
Of
like,
course,
based on
of
this,
course.
like it's probably either in bio research or high level pharmaceuticals. And so they're like kind of trying to pigeon, and she refused to, well, I shouldn't say she refused. She didn't respond to any of those. So I don't know.
Yeah.
But
It may be best from the perspective of outing your employer for shitty planning.
Right. And then, the other side conversations were really about controlling spouses, and they really dissected the original language of the post where it was like, the kids, don't you mean your kids? Like, like it seemed like he was forcing the child care on her, and just in general, they really didn't like the way his language was. So
I'm not as troubled by that because people type stuff up and some team, I don't, I could, the kids, my kids, I'm not ready to find fault there. And the child care is being pushed onto her. It sounds like in that situation because they had plans, I'm curling tonight and my wife will be handling the child care while I'm curling because, well,
yeah, and I think it's not terribly uncommon for couples to take shifts. I hear couples all the time say, "This is my 2-hour shift," and I heard this over the recent break where a number of people were traveling and celebrating with families. They would talk about how one or the other partner was on duty for this period of time, and it was predetermined and it was negotiated and communicated, and that was very much the child care duty of one partner and then the other. And this guy had an expectation that he had plans, and so I'm with you. I'm not particularly troubled by all of that.
Oh, I'm willing to shit on him.
Oh, well, for sure, but for different reasons. I'm not willing to assume that he has wasted all of the child care responsibilities onto her.
Right.
Yeah. Well, thank you both for another riveting debate and a glimpse into the collective conscious and internet forums. I don't know. We'll check in next week for some other Am I the Asshole debate.
Gail, we get a lot of people saying, how do I even start? How do I know it's going to be a good fit? What if I see a therapist and I'm like, I don't like this person, or I don't get along with them. Or the last therapist I saw, I saw them 3 or 4 visits and I just didn't ever connect.
Yeah. I standardly tell people you need to be in the right place at the right time with the right person. And that's why we offer a 20-minute free consultation, no pressure, no commitments, really just to make sure you've met all 3 of those criteria.
Yeah, I found that this is a part of our practice that I love being able to offer that I've never been able to offer in the first 28 years I did therapy. Be able to offer this opportunity just to sit down, chat a little bit, get to know this person. So you're not signing on for psychotherapy after just reading a profile on a website.
No, exactly. You get a little window into how we work, if the logistics of our practice are going to work for you. And then you get to make a decision.
Yeah. And if you go to our website, veritaspp.com, there's a link to sign up for a brief initial consultation. You can do that all on your own. You don't even have to reach out and call anyone. You just click, and we'll set up that 20-minute visit. And there's a quick consent form we ask you to sign just to know that it's not therapy yet. It's just a consultation. But those meetings, I think, are really helpful.
Sometimes the hardest part is just making that initial contact. And I love the 20 minutes because it's so low pressure.
Yeah.
Reach out to us.
So we've done at least one other of these. So this is not a new thing, but this is our That Would Never Work in Therapy segment. There are a couple of these moments, in TV, television, film, whatever, that I'm just kind of interested in. And we had, I think in the previous one we recorded, teased talking about The Sopranos. But what I realized is there were a couple of things in The Sopranos that might be worth talking about. Do you have a hunch about which one I'm going to ask you, Dan?
I don't, but I will admit that this segment always starts getting me a little bit riled up because there's so much bad portrayal of psychologists and psychotherapists in TV and movies that I just because it's either the psychologist is more has more mental health problems than their client does, or it's just portrayal of psychotherapy in a way that is just wildly inaccurate. So I every time I see there's a therapist in a movie, I always get like, I walk into the room tense and ready, like for some, you know. So you go ahead, and I did watch the entirety of The Sopranos 20 years ago. I don't know, whenever it went off the air. So we're relying on my memory and Gail's as well.
Well, for
Well,
you and anybody who's less familiar, I'll give a little background. So, if first of all, if you've never seen The Sopranos, it's about a mob boss, Tony Soprano, and I wouldn't say that therapy is a side plot. Like it's a big piece of
Yeah,
it, really.
it's featured quite a bit.
And he enters treatment for panic attacks. Ultimately, is really what he goes in for. And Dr. Jennifer Melfi is his therapist. And he sees her a bunch, and she's really one of the people he can be honest and confide in and receive objective feedback, even though she does express moments where she's not sure how much she can push back against him, which is fair.
fair.
Fair. Mm-hmm.
Anyway, there is a moment though where she stops treatment, and that's what I was going to ask you about. She's like, I can't see you anymore. This has happened. I don't feel like I can be objective, and I am ending treatment with you. And I'm just wondering, like, obviously treatment comes to an end at times, and it's run its course. And I'm just kind of wondering, like, would this be ethical to leave somebody in this scenario where he's still dealing with panic attacks and clearly benefiting from therapy? But Dr. Melfi feels too conflicted to continue.
I've done this.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a way to do it.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't recall the particulars in the show, but my suspicion is it fell on the side of not quite ethical. But
Probably not.
there is a pathway. Dan, talk about the pathway. How do we do this?
Yeah, I mean, if I feel as a therapist, my job is to be present for my client. And if I feel like I can't, we call maintain therapeutic distance, meaning that I keep it about my client, not about me. If I find that my own personal stuff is going to interfere, I'm required to get help to deal with that on my own. But if my stuff gets in the way, I have to say to the person, I can't work with you because I have a conflict. I wouldn't disclose what the conflict is unless it was evident in some way. But then my responsibility is to help find them an appropriate referral, because it would be, while it's unethical to work with them if I can't maintain distance, it's also unethical for me to just abandon them, to be like, oh, I can't work with you anymore. You need to find a new therapist. So it's up to me to help them to find the appropriate referrals to get to the next therapist, so that I'm balancing those things out. And maybe I continue to work with them until I get them to that therapist, but we avoid topics where I wouldn't be able to do it, which would be less than ideal. I haven't had to do that, fortunately. But it's balancing those ethical requirements to not abandon the client, and at the same time to make the therapy about them, not about the therapist. You have anything, you got stuff to add, Gail?
No, I mean, I think, right, we have to end treatment for any number of reasons. Michael, you alluded to the person got better. So at that place, you're making a collaborative medical decision or therapeutic decision to end treatment, and we are all in agreement. Awesome, we took care of the thing. But when people still have active symptoms or are in need of ongoing treatment, then there's those scenarios, as Dan talked about, where we have a conflict of interest and we can't maintain that therapeutic distance, or, something is going on with the therapist in the room and they cannot provide that treatment. We have an obligation to be able to do that. But, there's also that reality of when you leave an organization, whether you retire or you are let go or you choose to leave of your own free will, you still have a responsibility to make a plan for those people that you're seeing, so that, again, they can transition to care. What's not required, you have to make an appropriate referral and you can give them options. What's not required is they don't have to love the options you give them. That sometimes is the problem too, is they say, well, you've given me 3 options of therapists. I don't like any of them. I want to see you. I'm sorry, I cannot be an option, and so we're not forced into a situation where we have to then continue to be the option if it's problematic. And then, as you said, Dan, we also have an obligation to assess whether or not that thing that is maybe preventing us from seeing someone, if it's our own personal issue, something that's happened, does that require um, additional therapeutic work so that you can be a better, more psychologically healthy person. But also, I think as therapists, we're allowed to say, I just don't work with this. Let's
Yeah.
say someone, a therapist has a parent who had unregulated bipolar disorder throughout their entire lives.
Mhm.
And they say, you know what, as a therapist, I just don't want to be that therapist that
Yeah.
works with either individuals who have bipolar disorder or be in a position to support their family. I may feel really good about the work I've done on my own upbringing, but it's going to bring stuff back. I don't know that I can be the best person to maintain that kind of distance. And so we're allowed to kind of carve those things out and
Yeah.
say, I don't treat that. But that allows us to say that up front. Oh, hey, you're presenting with this thing. By the way, I have a conflict of interest, or I simply don't treat that. And you make that referral very quickly. Those referrals
Yeah.
are easier than when we've established and something's happened or we've learned something new and then need to kind of pivot in the moment.
Yeah, and I've certainly done that with, I'm seeing someone for anxiety or depression, or I'm seeing someone for their sleep problems. They're doing really good work, and they come to me and they disclose down the road some significant severe trauma that is really impacting them. And I'm uncomfortable talking about this, but I want to share this with you. And I recognize that this person really needs a good systematized approach to deal with trauma, CPT or EMDR, something that I don't do. And I don't really work with I don't do that kind of work. I refer a lot of those folks to you, Gail. And if there's a conflict there, to someone else, but I can say to them, we've done great work on this. I don't do this work. And while I could potentially help you with your trauma issues, there's some specific work that is going to be better and going to help you more and give you a much greater probability of getting better. And we do this like medicine does this all the time. Primary care doctors, even specialists do this all the time. Like, oh, you know what? I don't treat this, but I know someone, like they're really great with this, and they refer to Ken. She's terrific. You should see her instead of me. And this is fine to do in therapy too, and in fact, appropriate and recommended.
So also interesting, I think, in this conversation, because the segment is, would this work in therapy? And so the question was, can you do this? And I think, okay, fine, that's a good question, and we've talked it maybe even beyond what it needed to be talked about. But there's also this interesting piece of it that while we were discussing, it occurred to me, which is when someone presents with an issue and you say, gosh, I don't treat this. And maybe it's been sort of underlying and kind of maybe, even the reason why someone's maybe not getting better. It's sometimes really nice to be able to come back and say, hey, I think it's this thing that's kind of getting in our way. And I'd like to refer you to a specialist to do a certain kind of treatment. It lends this kind of weightiness to it. And I have found historically then being able to name it, to identify a treatment, has been able to push someone at times therapeutically to take this perspective into account where maybe they were more dismissive of how this was impacting their functioning. So I do think not only are we obligated from the therapist end, I think from a treatment perspective, really having a careful, constructed, thoughtful conversation with someone can help them understand the gravity of maybe what they're experiencing or what may be underlying that for them, and referring out is really appropriate. Sometimes borderline personality disorder is a great example of that, where we can have a very caring conversation about what this diagnosis means, what the treatment entails, and why you should do it this way.
Right. And I have found that, a lot of therapists are sometimes have some anxiety about this, but I have found that for the most part, with a few exceptions, the most part of the clients I presented this to have felt respected by it. Like, oh, he's not just going to keep working with me if he can't help me. He's referring me to someone who really knows their stuff. I like the work we've done, and I'm kind of bummed about it. But I can that makes total sense, and I appreciate seeing someone who is more highly skilled in this area. I think it's fine to say to someone, I don't have these skills. Again, our physician colleagues certainly say, I don't have the skill to do this procedure. I need to refer you to someone else. I see nothing wrong with me saying the same thing. I don't have the skill to work with this issue or to do the type of therapy needed. Let me refer you to a colleague who is terrific.
Yeah.
Great. Well, thank you for the real life application of this. And I'll say, like, actually, hearing you talk and what I remember of The Sopranos, which I watched less than 20 years ago, was they probably did a pretty good job of it, really, because she has her own therapist that she is seeing for issues. Because actually, earlier in the series, she suffers a sexual assault. And so there's a therapist she sees, and she talks through kind of like, I'm struggling because I know I can get immediate justice if I tell Tony about the sexual assault. And she is really racked with guilt about that, because there is a desire for that. And Tony tells her, like, you tell me who did this and it'll be done.
Yeah,
And
that's the scene I thought you were talking about, because it's a really delightful scene, because you can see the anxiety in her face and the conflicting desires to like share this information, just even if she can't. It's funny because I remember it so different. I remember it as happening without him saying it out loud. I remember her just sitting there with the knowledge and it not being said out loud. But maybe they did give specific voice to it. But I do remember that and thinking, gosh, as a therapist, that might be.
I'll throw this out, Michael. You can ultimately decide to keep this or not. It might seem unrealistic for a female therapist to know that her gangster mob affiliated client might have those, affectionate kinds of feelings enough about the therapist that take care of someone. The reality is, as a female therapist, I know that I have been cared for by clients enough that the implication has been there. Not that I have been tempted to ever take advantage of that, but I can think of 2 instances where male clients have, just been like, no one better ever mistreat you. And it's a little unsettling, right? Because you have a strong therapeutic rapport. This is about them, but they are feeling very protective, and it's an interesting dynamic in the therapy room. That's maybe a whole nother conversation, but it's not something we can always prevent. We do have to be careful about how we handle that. I think as a male therapist, you probably don't get that kind of level of feeling of protectiveness. But as women in the room, sometimes our male clients feel very protective of us. And so I think what Dr. Jennifer Melfi is that scene is portraying, I don't think is as unrealistic as we might think it is.
Yeah.
And the actual scene when she terminates therapy is several seasons later. Like, she wrestles with that for a long time, and then she tells him, and you can see, like, he has an outburst of anger, and she is terrified in that moment, but stands her ground, and he kind of seethes, and she's saying, like, I have a referral for you. And anyway, but yeah, it's interesting, to kind of have this glimpse into kind of holding up the fiction, to the reality. So thanks for that. I appreciate it. We'll see what comes up next, and if we can keep doing segments from this where we have a shared familiarity with scenes. So I appreciate it.
So if today had one theme, it's this: limits are inevitable, but confusion is optional. In Try This at Work, the core move was naming reality early and translating it into choices. Not I can't as in a dead end, but here's what I can do, and here's the trade-off for adjusting plans. In Am I the Asshole, we quickly saw how silence gets interpreted, how when someone can't communicate, the other person fills that gap with the story. And the repair is not just explaining what happened, it's acknowledging the impact on that person and rebuilding predictability going forward. In the Sopranos segment, we learned termination reminds us that closure is a clinical skill. Ending well is not abandonment, it's structure, transparency, and a plan that protects the client's dignity and momentum. If you want one practical takeaway from all 3 segments, try this the next time you hit a limit. Name the constraint, name what you can offer, close the loop with a clear next step. That 3-part move reduces resentment, reduces mind reading, and keeps the relationship, professional or personal, inside reality. I'm Michael, Veritas Views. Thanks for spending time with us. If you liked what you heard, like, follow, share, and definitely tune in next week.
You can follow Dr. Dan Kessler at Dr. Dan Kessler and Dr. Gail McBride at Dr. G. McBride. Oh, and you can find them both at veritaspp.com. We love hearing from you, so please review us on Apple, Spotify, or, well, wherever you're listening. If you enjoyed this podcast, please review, like, and follow. Also, give it a share. This helps us reach more listeners. Credits: Tickling the Ivories, Matthew Reddington. Art, production, and design, bringing this show together with flair and finesse, Michelle Love. Recording and editing, turning chaos into something worth sharing, Michael McBride. Intro, outro, I'm Kelly Buttrick, a VO talent who just happens to be Dr. McBride's cousin. Cats, CJ, Linus, Sadie, and Griffin. Hosting by whomever lost the coin flip. Interruptions by all their children. The content of this podcast is for informational and educational purposes only and is not a substitute for professional mental health advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Listening to this podcast does not constitute a therapist-client relationship. If you believe you may be experiencing a mental health issue, please seek the assistance of a qualified mental health professional. If you are experiencing a mental health crisis, you can call or text 988 from anywhere in the U.S. to be connected to Crisis Mental Health Services.